Welcome to the Manuscript Academy podcast,
Brought to you by
a writer
and an agent.
who both believe that education is key
The beauty is the people you meet along the way.
and that community makes all the difference.
Here at the Manuscript Academy, you can learn the skills, make the connections, and have access to experts, all from home.
I'm Julie Kingsley.
And I'm Jessica Sinsheimer.
Put down your pens, pause your word counts, and enjoy.
Hi, everyone. We are here with author Kristy Jackson. Kristy has a really fun new novel all about a girl who goes on an incredible journey learning to find herself, find her confidence, and my goodness, is the road there interesting. Kristy, we're so happy you're here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Kristy, tell us about your journey. How did you move from writer to the spot with us right now?
Okay, so I've actually always wanted to be a writer ever since I was like a little kid. And I kind of made an attempt at it in my teens and 20s, but I didn't really have the confidence to deal with the rejection that you have to go through in order to make it, right? I wasn't really happy with it back then. And I kind of gave up, and then life happened, kids, husband, all the things. And then I turned 40 and I was like, okay, I've always had this dream. And if I'm going to do this, maybe I should do this now. So I decided I was going to just give it my best shot at that point and tried my best to get over my shyness and just go for this journey. So I did. And I started off taking some writing classes. I finished writing a novel that I really liked and started querying that, and never did actually end up getting that one published. But someone gave me the excellent advice to just keep writing, keep going. And I wrote another one called Mortified. And then that was the one that actually ended up getting me an agent and getting me published. And here I am today.
Yay. So, okay, slow down a little bit. So,
Yeah.
huge journey here. So many things you just mentioned. And thank you, by the way, for admitting that this is hard. I don't
Mhm.
understand how so many authors are out here pretending to be extroverts and completely fine. Audience of 5,000, no problem. I'm Brene Brown, no big deal. I love that so many people are able to, frankly, I think fake it until they make it. But it is a big thing to overcome. And I just want to emphasize that all the writers out there listening, if you find this hard, yeah, most of us do too.
Yeah, I think a lot of us writers would prefer to just lock the door and be alone in a room with our computer and our thoughts and just do our thing. But getting out there is part of it from what I can tell and from talking to other authors. And so here I am and trying to do that very thing.
You did the thing. Okay, so how did you find your agent?
So I started by querying, and I ended up with about 100 rejections in total, actually, before I found an agent. But I decided to go to a workshop. It was a how to get published workshop in Toronto, which is about, 1,700 miles away from where I live. So I took a
Wow.
plane. Yeah, there isn't a lot of those kinds of things happening here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is where I'm from. So I decided to hop a plane and go and see this particular workshop as part of this, trying to get out of my comfort zone. Because I found meeting with agents to be almost like meeting rock stars, right? Like it was just like overwhelming. Oh my gosh, you guys are, just awesome. And I'm so nervous. And so I just thought, okay, I'm going to go and meet someone in person. So I went to this workshop, and part of the workshop was she offered to do a critique of queries if you volunteered. So I did. I put my hand up and volunteered, and she really liked my query. And so we got to talking after the workshop, and that's when she invited me to submit my full request. And I did end up actually having a couple of other agents that were interested as well. So I think I would have gotten there just through the query route, but I'm really glad I did do the crazy thing and hop a plane and go to Toronto and meet an agent in person. And she's the one that I'm with still.
And this is so brave. You got on a plane, you went somewhere you've probably never been before to talk to someone you find intimidating, to talk about your work, which is so vulnerable, and it worked out.
Yes, it was awesome because when you meet someone in person, you can tell whether you're going to click or not. And immediately, her and I, we could just tell that we would work very well together. And so that was a huge advantage over, sort of the query process where you don't get that chance, right? And so that's where I actually found the Manuscript Academy service of meeting with an agent to be hugely beneficial too, is because you get that chance to meet somebody and see if you click as well as getting their feedback.
Well, it is. It's so important. And I did just review your query letter because you sent it in to
Yeah.
us. And I thought it was terrific. Would you be willing to share it with us?
Yeah, no, I can read it. And I went and counted. I had 21 different versions of a query letter
Wow.
that I'd gone through. And the one that I started with is completely different than this one. And it evolved over, just meeting with agents through Manuscript Academy, meeting with my writing group and their feedback, and then just even me reading it and going, okay, no, this needs a tweak, or I'm not getting any responses. So this was the winning one. So, okay. Dear Olga, given your interest in memorable characters and middle grade fiction, I thought you might like Mortified, my 48,000 word contemporary middle grade novel with a touch of magic. Set in a tiny northern Saskatchewan town with more dogs than people, Mortified can fit on the shelf next to Awkward by Svetlana Chmakova, Unplugged by Gordon Corman, and Stand Up Yumi Chung by Jessica Kim. Shy 13-year-old Belinda Hoole wants to be an actress. She loves becoming someone else for a while, knowing exactly what to say and do. Unfortunately, she's terrified of having an audience. When Belinda's mom secretly signs her up to audition for the school play and her crush Ricky wishes her luck in the auditions, she realizes she has no choice. She's going to have to audition. Her best friend Sally, who thinks she's a witch, long story, tries to help by casting a spell to give Belinda confidence, but something goes wrong. And instead of confidence, Belinda has an embarrassing moment whenever she's in public. She sits on a pie, accidentally eats dog food, suffers a catastrophic hair incident, and worse. Now everyone stares at her all the time, including her rival and former best friend, Chloe. To break the spell, Belinda must finally find the guts to face her fears, act in front of an audience, and take a shot at doing what she loves. Mortified draws inspiration from my Indigenous, Cree, and German background and my long list of embarrassing moments. In addition to being published by Commuter Lit and Kids Short Stories, I'm the mother of 2 boys and a communications professional. I run a program that delivers books to children in 7 remote Indigenous communities in Canada, and I volunteer for a nonprofit dedicated to improving literacy in my community. I have included the first 10 pages as per your submission guidelines. Thank you for your consideration, and I welcome any feedback you have. Sincerely, Kristy Jackson.
I love so much about it.
Yeah.
That you packed so much in. I feel like I knew the character. I feel like I knew the quirkiness from it, the stakes. I really love like this idea of, and I pulled it out of the actual work too, the small town with more dogs than people. I think sometimes like the economy of saying so little. And I think what you did really well, and I wanted to talk to you about this because I thought it was so interesting, setting as character here. Like for the American audience, we have a very unusual, we don't hear a lot about, am I even going to say it right? Sasquatch. Say it one more time. Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
See, that's right. I got nervous and I was like, I'm going to botch this. You know what I mean? Because I kind of can see it up on the map, but we were right there. We understood the stakes of this world, but then it felt like it could be anywhere, which shows that you can like really ground a story anywhere and have it be interesting, but also appeal to the masses. Talk about that. Why did you choose the setting in this story?
So Saskatchewan is where I'm from and where I live. And I chose it because, well, first of all, there's not a lot of literature set necessarily in Saskatchewan. And, we're a unique place, right? I kind of partly wanted to get that personality of Saskatchewan in there, like we call hoodies bunny hugs here and nobody knows why. And so like I threw these kind of details in there, and we have these small towns where literally there's sometimes there's more dogs than people. And I graduated from a small town school as well. So, and I really thought everyone everywhere, really, not just kids, has an embarrassing moment at some point, right? I happen to have had very many of them. And I wanted there's this story to have like sort of massive appeal where it could happen to anyone, but also just outline a bit of the cool stuff about where I come from and where I live.
Well, it's that great paradox, right? Of it's so specific, yet it's so universal. And I felt so much for the characters here. Do you remember in magazines, they used to have those how embarrassing moments? And it's always some
Yeah.
little tiny thing like, I dropped a fry. Oh no. And it's just like, where is the real actual embarrassment? And you capture it so well. Can you talk about how you did that? Because you did not shy away from how it actually feels to be that age when everything is embarrassing.
Yeah. I guess I've had a lot of experience being embarrassed. So maybe that's why I was able to write about it a lot. This book kind of came about because one of my sons had an embarrassing moment at school and he came home and he was upset. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll tell you a story from when I was a kid. And so I told him one and he was laughing and he's like, okay, tell me another one. And then my other son kind of starts hearing this and he's sitting down and all of a sudden I'm telling all these embarrassing stories and they were laughing. And then one of them said, it's like you're cursed or something. So that was kind of the
Oh.
aha moment for me going, that might be not a bad idea for a book. So then I started playing with it and that's the seed that eventually became Mortified.
One thing I love is that you never define if there's a magical element. And I feel like that is such a beautiful thing because when you're that age, it is like the last few years you have when it is possible for the world to work that way and you aren't sure yet.
Yes.
And I love Sally. Sally is that friend everyone should have in middle school. And I think you do a valuable service here, not only teaching people about how they can grow, and we'll get to some other lessons, bigger lessons in a moment, but giving them a high bar of what friendship can be like. Someone willing to just jump in the trenches with you when everything is going wrong. Can you talk about how you built that relationship there?
Yes. So the character of Sally, like the friendship is based on my own best friend and my friendship, actually.
Aw.
Her and I met when we were 12 years old, and she never thought she's a witch. I just want to make that clear right out of the top. That's that's fiction. But she's been that kind of friend for me right from the get go, where you just knew she had your back always. So, as I was writing this story, I just really kind of was remembering back to some times when I was a kid and what it was like when you kind of needed that friend and that boost and she was always there. And so I based a lot of that on my best friendship with my friend Jerry.
Well, that's
I-
beautiful.
So, and I think that is the age where you start having different friends too,
Mhm.
and yeah, you captured putting those tweens together so beautifully. So, can you talk to us about your characters? I thought you did a great job of inner and outer wants, right? What you really want inside, to be accepted, to be in the play, to do those things. But then you're having like these big outer wants, I'm thinking in particular the hair scene, which that happened to me in seventh grade. Like
No.
my mother,
Yep.
like permed my hair and it like basically fell out. I was like, oh, I have some PTSD from this scene, but I loved it. So it's like those things you want, but you don't know why you want them, right? And the inner and the outer wants. And talk to us about how you did that, as a writer and how you established that throughout this book.
Yeah, that's a good question. The hair scene, first of all, condolences. I've also been there twice.
Oh
Um,
no.
yeah,
Oh no.
once with a straightening and once with a perm before I learned my lesson to just quit messing with what nature gave me. But sorry, what was the question again? Inner versus outer wants, right?
Yeah. Like I said, you did such a great job with that. It was very specific. I want my hair done. I want this. I want, the boy. But also I want to be seen. I want to be accepted. So very specific, but then you have just themes of middle school.
Yeah, I think with that, you think back to when you were a kid and it's really hard to remember back that far. I mean, for me, this was well over 3 decades ago. So, but there's scars that you always carry that you always remember from when you were young. And now having kids around that age too, I have an 11 and 15-year-old now. So they're sort of in the thick of it. And I think I sort of drew inspiration from what I see and what I felt as a kid and just did my best to fill in some gaps and tell a story from the perspective of a 12-year-old girl who's feeling so self-conscious that she's just not willing to put herself out there.
Well, it's interesting too, because it's short-term wants and long-term wants, right?
Mhm.
She wants short-term to feel safe, and my goodness, for just nothing embarrassing to happen today. But long-term, she has to risk that to become the person she wants. And I loved that scene with her dad where he's like, you can just keep telling yourself, I'll do it next year, but someday you're going to wake up and be middle-aged and you haven't done it. And you just need to take these huge risks.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that scene in particular. When I reread this book after I wrote it, so the first time I write it, you just sort of write as fast as you can, right? And then, okay, you read it over and there's certain themes that that come out that you maybe didn't necessarily mean to put in there. And that was one of them where I was reading it and kind of laughing because it's clearly me telling myself, you need to go for this, right? And I kind of did this through the characters of the book in a subconscious way at first, but I did bring it out a little bit more in the second draft because I did think it was a good theme for, not just kids, but for us middle-aged folks as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I think you did so brilliantly. I guess I would file this under show don't tell, but it's more interesting than that. You have her go through all of these moments where it's just like, oh my gosh, this is so vivid. This is so terrible. I feel so bad for her. And each time she gets back up, she dusts herself off. She goes to something else, knowing it's likely going to be terrible, knowing her pants are ridiculous, knowing all these things have gone wrong. And you start to see her putting together that maybe what seems like a curse for embarrassment is actually a spell for confidence. Can you talk about that?
yeah, so Belinda literally has to face her worst fear over and over and over again in this. And that was purposeful because part of what holds a person back, or at least in my experience, held me back was the what ifs. What if I go on a podcast and sound like an idiot? What if I trip and fall in front of somebody? What if I go on stage and don't do a good job public speaking or whatever? And a lot of it's that sort of what ifs, and that can sort of cripple you, right? And stop you from going for it. Whereas she's under this spell where she literally has to face this over and over and over, and there's really just no choice. And she kind of comes to this gradually this realization that, well, what can be worse than all the embarrassing moments I've already suffered? I might as well go on a stage and do what it is I love to do and go for it. So that was kind of the intent and the journey that I was hoping to put this character through.
Not saying that people should go out there and seek out embarrassment or pain or awkwardness. I know
Or
there are
ants.
workshops. I know there are workshops where people literally go out and purposely get rejected for all kinds of ridiculous asks. They go walk up to strangers, "Hey, can I have your car?" And they do it over and over again so that it starts to be less painful. But I feel like so much about what makes life the thing that we're seeking out, like anything we want in life, you have to be willing to just dive in and take that brave step. And when we see her do this over and over again, and we start to see her say, okay, well, I've survived this terrible thing and this other terrible thing, I can do it. I feel like so much of that works for creativity too, Is that something writers should be thinking about? Like, go out, get rejected, and then prove to yourself it's going to be okay?
We can call it the Belinda technique.
Yes. It's not a terrible technique. I used to be so afraid to show my writing to anybody that I just wouldn't. And it took me a long time to even show my husband. And I finally did, because my husband is the kind of person who will tell you, like, your pants don't look good on you. Meaning he's just a blunt guy, right? And so I was worried that, he might tell me what I didn't want to hear. So I started with him, and then I started with my kids after that. That gave me the confidence I needed to start getting out there a bit. So the next thing I did was I started taking writing classes. And one class in particular I took was a weekly thing where everybody took turns being in what I'll call the hot seat.
Yikes.
And everybody else would read their thing. And the object of the game was to critique it and try and help you make it as best as possible. And there's nothing quite like having 10 people tell you all the things wrong with your piece of writing. Like at first it was really hard to do. But as I kept taking this class, like I got used to it, and I got used to, okay, like it's not a personal attack. This is people trying to help. And a lot of their comments are very valid. And so exposing myself to doing that over and over helped a lot, and was also a gateway to the query world, which is rejections of a different type, right? Where you often don't get feedback, or you may not hear back. And that's just kind of part of it. So the Belinda technique is not the worst way, I would say, to try and get over that fear if you have it, which I certainly did and still kind of do. So
I was really taken by the structure of your book, in particularly the graphic novel nature of each chapter. Every chapter has kind of like a tiny little graphic novel to start it, that kind of is like a precursor to what's going to happen in the chapters. It's genius for a couple different ways. One, it's such great scaffolding for a reader that maybe struggles a little bit, which after the pandemic, that's happening a lot. The readers aren't as fluent as they used to be. Was that your idea, Kristy? Was that your publisher? And talked about that process?
Yeah, so I have to thank HarperCollins for that idea. They actually had that vision straight from the get-go. And as soon as my editor, her name is Yash, suggested it, I was like, this is brilliant. I love, love, love that idea. I have two boys, and boy readers, I think, really appreciate the visual, especially my boys. And I just thought that that was fantastic. And I was really lucky too, in that HarperCollins was on board with finding, an illustrator and allowing me to have some feedback into that process as well. So I have to thank Rael McGregor, who is the illustrator for this book, who did just an absolutely fantastic job of it and brought it to life in a different way than I did. And can't thank Rael enough for that.
Oh, that's nice.
What are kids saying about the book? Have you heard from young readers yet?
I've had it with some test readers. It's not actually released just yet. It's released to the public on May the 21st. So I have had it with test readers who are, for the most part, horrified for poor Belinda, but can't seem to help themselves from reading more. So I think that's kind of what I was going for. The comments I've heard is that they find it funny and it's a good story. And so, like, good things from my young readers. And I've done a few practice classroom visits too, and kind of gone over the concept with the kids, and they all seem very excited for the book to come out. So I think I'm on the right track for it.
Okay, so you have this amazing query letter. You have this book with all of these components working for it. Where did you start editorially? What was the book like before you edited it? What was the query like before you edited it?
So I'll start with the book. I usually spend a fair amount of time thinking through the structure of it before writing. Because I have a full-time job, kids, volunteer, all the things, I spend a lot of time writing where it's literally, okay, I got 10 minutes. I'm going to bang out a scene or a paragraph or whatever. Or I did a lot of writing early in the morning, waking up at 5:30 between meetings. Okay, I'll throw a little bit in here. So I always had to have a map in order to be able to do that, right? And so I actually spent probably just as much time, if not more, thinking through the structure, characters, what was going to happen before I actually sat down to write it. Each of those processes probably took about 3 months apiece. And so then when I finished the first draft, I kind of left it for a bit. And then I went back and looked at it and went, oh my goodness, this needs a lot of work. I started bringing it to my group that, provided all that lovely feedback. And they helped me fix a few things there. And I edited it, I think, 2 or 3 rounds before I then hired actually a professional editor to look at it. And then I edited it a couple more times, and then I started querying it.
Long process for everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
And your query, where did it begin and how did you get to the draft that you got?
So I actually found the query to be almost as hard to write as the whole book. It's a very different skill set, I think, to write a query than it is to write a book. In a query, it's got to be so tight, right? The agents don't have much time. That's one thing I've learned. Their time is very precious. They get an amazing amount of inquiries every month, and they're looking through it real quick, like in a line at a Starbucks. It's on their phone kind of thing. I took some querying workshops, read up on it, sent out a few, see if I would get any bites. And if I didn't, then I would edit it and try again with another handful of agents. And when I started getting some bites, that's when I kind of knew, okay, we're getting closer. And I also too spent a fair amount of time meeting with, I think it was 4 different agents through the Manuscript Academy, and getting their feedback on it too. And that was helpful to help me figure out what I needed to change, but also to help me hear that, yeah, I'm on a good track here. I should keep going. And that feedback was valuable, incredibly valuable for me to continue going, even when you feel like terrible. Oh no, I got another rejection, and you're feeling kind of bummed. And it just was sometimes having that meeting where an agent would say, this is really good, and here's what I liked, and as well as, like, here's what I'd suggest you change. I think that was incredibly valuable. But yeah, I went through, I think it was 21 different versions before I finally landed on the one I got. So
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you have any tips for staying positive during that process? Were there any things that you did that was helpful?
Yeah, I would have a little bit of a routine where if I got a rejection, I would let myself have my little pity for a little bit. And then I would do something nice for myself. I maybe take my kids out for ice cream or something and just make sure to do something fun. And then the other thing I would do is immediately write another query letter and send one off, just so that I was always just putting one foot forward in front of the other one. And my writing group was also hugely valuable. Having people you can talk to that know how it feels in the querying trenches and understand, our little writer hearts and how we want so badly to tell our stories. And I think just having that community was absolutely essential too.
Do you remember what specifically you changed editorially?
So my character Belinda has curly hair, and I initially had it so that towards the end she gets the straight hair that she always wanted. And as I read through a round of it, it was actually my editor, HarperCollins, that suggested, maybe it'd be nice to have a book where the curly hair isn't such a bad thing, right? And she learns to embrace that. And I really, really loved that because as a kid, I hated my curly hair. I hated it so much because I didn't know how to handle it really. And so having that editorial change, I think, was really smart. And I'm very, very grateful to my editor for that.
And as someone with curly hair, very much appreciate that as well. I feel like so many books are like, and then she has straight hair and lives happily ever after.
Yes.
Though I like that she had maybe 30 seconds with it. She had that vision where it's like, things are going to work out. Can't believe that's me. I'm going to go to school and be popular. And then disaster.
Yeah.
I liked that a lot. Another thing I liked that I haven't seen very often, Chloe, terrible, but very true to life. Love that. Mean, awful. One thing I really like, though, is that the love interest isn't falling for it. Can you talk more about that choice?
I really liked the idea of having the love interest be a guy who didn't fall for the typical sort of things that made girls popular, right? And I liked the idea that he liked Belinda basically just as much as she liked him. He just sees right through Chloe, and I think that's what I was going for in that character.
I love the idea of him setting a high bar.
Mhm.
Kids out there will be like, oh, wow. I mean, I'm sure most of them will be like, the guy I like isn't nearly that smart or emotionally intelligent, but it's possible. And I think that's such a good example to have at that age, too. I know people talk a lot about how far the romantic element can go in middle grade. Can you talk about the parameters you heard, any changes you made? I think you strike a perfect balance, but it's hard to know where that is for every book.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I have two sons to help me be my first readers because it's a girl protagonist, but I stayed away from girly, sort of embarrassing moments that were too far for a boy to read because I wanted boys to be able to read this as well and enjoy it. And, having them be sort of the first readers. Boys will tell you right away, ew, that's kissing, gross, right? And I didn't want to go too far into that sort of thing too. So I just kept it where I thought they would be interested in reading it. And I think that helped guide it better than anything.
Yeah, it is an interesting question, because of course people do have crushes at that age. The way you described the way that she was interpreting her new thoughts and feelings, I thought was really interesting too. There's a moment where she just pictures herself cuddled up on a couch with him and she's like, wait, where did that come from? It's so cute.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that age group really, they're just new to crushes and those sorts of feelings, right? And that intense feeling that they would get that we all got when we were that age, right? Around the boy that we liked or the girl that we liked.
And can you talk about middle grade voice? It's so hard to get right. How did you get it right?
My agent has asked me that question as well. I don't know. When I'm writing from her perspective, I put myself in the shoes of a 12-year-old girl and just try to be her as much as I can. And I've done that with my second book that I've been working on since then. And that protagonist is a boy. So that was a bit harder because I've never been a boy, but I dusted the cobwebs of memory and kind of put myself into Belinda's shoes as much as I could and just try to be her and see things through her perspective. And her 12 years of experience in life are very different than my 45, right? So that's kind of how I tried to do that. I also read a lot of middle grade fiction. I've been reading with my sons for a long time, and I quite enjoy middle grade fiction. And even though they're kind of too old to really want to read with me much anymore, I've continued reading more middle grade fiction. And I think having that base is important as well.
So you are so good at showing character growth in your book. How did you grow throughout this process?
I think writing this book, so much of it is about confidence. And that was obviously an issue for me. And from the time I started writing this book to where I am at now, my level of confidence has changed significantly because I've done the Belinda technique, so to speak, and had to go through all these things. And now I'm doing a podcast, which is another first for me.
We're honored.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. And this isn't nearly as nerve-wracking as I thought once we get going. So so that's another lesson I'm starting to learn, is that anticipation is almost worse than the actual reality. But yeah, I think like through writing the book and through the process of getting it published, me as a person, I've grown in that respect.
So, what are some tips that you have for other writers out there? Just as they're about to take this journey, getting the book done, anything you want, like what would serve them from your journey?
I think, first of all, write a good book, right? Write as good a book as you can. Write whatever story speaks to you, whatever you would want to read. And the other piece is, don't just write one. When you write the one and you're querying it, I wish I remember who told me to say, keep writing another one. Don't just stop and query this one, but keep writing more, because it might not be your first book or your second, or, in my case, it's your third, and it might be your fourth. It might be who knows which one. But I think if you're really wanting to do this and you love writing, like, you just need to keep at it and, keep going. That's the biggest piece. I remember very well feeling how hard it was to be in the query trenches and to think that, is this ever going to happen for me? And it seemed to take forever at the time. But looking back, I think if it had happened when I was younger and I hadn't taken these steps to try and get out there a little bit, I would have been terrified. And I don't know if I could have handled doing the other parts of writing, which is sort of the getting out there in public, talking to kids in front of schools, and, being on podcasts or doing interviews, all those kinds of things.
And of course, you can just say pass, next question. But did
Okay.
you have an embarrassing moment in your writing or querying process that you then got over and ended up with more confidence?
In my writing and querying?
That's a good question.
Well, I'm trying to think. I know I accidentally sent wrong files to agents. I definitely did that numerous times, and I don't know how that happened over and over for me, but it just seems to have been a recurring theme for me, was just sending the wrong version or the wrong file or like completely unrelated thing to an agent. And I'm trying to think of another embarrassing moment in the agenting process.
It's so funny. I have this theory that I think writers get into more trouble than other people because we're like open to the drama, because we kind of live in drama. I mean, I'll tell you my Belinda moment. I was going to a writing weekend and I was in like a liquor store buying wine, and my skirt just fell down. It was just on the ground. And I was standing at the liquor store in my underwear, Belinda. And I turned around and this guy's like, I'll tag you on Facebook. I was like, oh no. But I just feel like that's part of all of this. And I think you hit it so wonderfully that like it happens when it happens, because sometimes you need a little extra skill, or maybe your kids couldn't be little, or maybe you really need to work on that confidence so that you can be an introvert and get the book done. But then all these other pieces can be so overwhelming. So like just trusting the process. That's what I heard from you. Trusting it, keep moving. And I think it's genius. I think that's what everyone should be doing.
And also, you make a really interesting point. You don't want it to work out too soon. Say more about that.
Yeah, I think I needed to go through all the parts of the journey before I could do what I'm doing now. My book's about to come out in less than 2 weeks, and I now have requests for interviews with media outlets. I'm doing podcasts today, and those kinds of things are another skill, one that I don't have a lot of practice in. And I think it's something that if you're not sort of used to forcing yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit, it's really easy to retreat and maybe not be so ready for that part of it. But it is part of the gig. If you want to be a published author and you want it to succeed, you need to kind of get out there and promote it. And so we're here today working on it. And yeah, I think that's part of the whole process.
I think also you need to get kicked down a few times before you trust that you can get back up. And if you have a completely smooth process, get your agent, get your publisher, and then suddenly tomorrow you're on Good Morning America, never having done anything, that is going to be the time when something major just happens to go wrong. Whether you're self-sabotaging or it's just because writers are open to these things, that would be the time that your hair comes out pink, or you fall down and now you are in the hospital instead of on Good Morning America, or something would just go wrong. Self-sabotage, bad luck. It just seems like a law of the universe that if everything is too frictionless, something will have to come up.
Yes. And my kids, have a bet going as to how many mortifying moments I'm going to have through this process because they think I'm cursed.
Oh,
I've had a lot of embarrassing moments, right? So far, it's been pretty good, but I'm prepared for the inevitable tripping, falling down, or whatever might happen.
And it's
but
okay.
who hasn't?
It's okay.
Who hasn't? And also, there is a wonderful moment in your book where someone says to Belinda, yeah, but it was pretty funny. And she's able to turn around and be like, yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
So when you get to a point, maybe you are there now, but when you get to a point where you can look at it from the outside and just be like, the human condition is ridiculous. Being a writer is ridiculous. Let's all just look at how absurd everything we're doing is together and see that this really could happen to anybody. Whatever it is, it could happen to anybody. You are not the only one who sent the wrong file.
No, I'm sure.
You are not the only one. If it happens, God forbid, I hope it doesn't. You will not be the only one who trips and falls on the way to the stage while everyone's looking at there's a spotlight. These things happen, and we don't talk about it out of consideration for the person. But believe me, I have seen so much go wrong and it end up okay.
Yeah. Actually, one of my favorite things is when I've done a few school visits now, and one of the things I ask the kids is if they're willing to share any of their embarrassing moments. And it's always quite a delight to hear their stories. And some of them are, pretty tame, but some of them are pretty bad. But what always strikes me is that they're willing to share, with their group of friends, which I don't know if I would have been brave enough to do that at 10, 11, 12 years old. But it is absolutely, everybody goes through embarrassing moments, some of us more than others. And that's why I thought, well, this would make a good story and hopefully help any kids out there who have gone through an embarrassing moment to, see they're not the only ones, and they're not the only ones to feel this way. So
as a writer, you could just log little things that happen, somewhere on your social media, somewhere on your website. Well, trip today. #mortified. I think it would actually be a very useful thing for other writers to see that it doesn't have to go perfectly to go well.
Yeah.
I'm curious, are we going to see more from Belinda?
Well, my next book, Belinda makes a small appearance, and so does Sally, but it's starring another kid in the same school. It's a new character, and he has his adventures. And yeah, I am starting to think about whether maybe Belinda and Sally have some more stories.
I kind of wondered if they did. I was like, you know what? Let's keep going with this one. Yeah. I was very curious. So you're a member of the Whitefish Lake First Nation?
Yeah.
Which, fascinating. And I almost could have taken more. I saw there were some references, the dad's chicken dance, which I was like, immediately I was there. But yeah, even more of that, more of the culture. I wanted all of it. I'm there for the ride.
Well, you'll be interested to read my second one then, because that one, the character goes to the res and has some adventures there as well. So
yeah, and I appreciated that. I felt like it was just there. We could take it in, and it was just perfect, where we get a sense of the multiculturalism of the book and Belinda's family, but it also just kind of felt like the world just has so much to explore.
Do you think what happened is a little bit magic?
In the book? In my mind, there was a touch of magic there, yes. But, I think it's perfectly fair that readers have interpreted it as there was no actual magical element. But yeah, and in my mind, Sally's got a little something and can make some things happen. And we might see a little bit more of that in future stories.
Hey.
Could you tell us the story of when you got the call from your agent?
Oh, yes. That was such a wonderful moment. So after I had met her in Toronto, and she said, yes, I'd like to have a look at the manuscript. So I sent it, and I was prepared to wait. You try not to just sit by the phone waiting, right? But it's really hard not to. But I was lucky. She actually got back to me. I think it was within 4 days. And, sent the email saying, I really loved Belinda's misadventures, and would you be available for a call? And that feeling was just absolutely just so amazing. I mean, we had a party. I literally had a party about a phone call. But yeah, it was so wonderful. And then to actually jump on the phone and get on a call with Olga and talk to her again, and everything, we talked and we gelled so well. And I just knew this was going to be a great partnership. So yeah, it was an easy yes for me after that.
Can you tell us some of the embarrassing stories you've heard on your travels so far?
With the kids, One kid told me about going into a grocery store and thought he saw his dad in an aisle and went running up to him, gave him a big hug and went, "Dad." And it turned out it wasn't his dad.
Oh,
Another kid told me about a time similar to your incident in the liquor store where he's wearing loose pants and he was walking and all of a sudden the pants just go down and he's got his underwear out and the way this kid told this story was just hilarious. Like he just had the class just howling with it. So those are two that kind of stuck out in my mind, but it just amazed me how kids were so willing to share these mortifying moments and be so honest about it. And I thought it was just great. And it was nice that they were all kind of having a discussion about, how it sucks to have an embarrassing moment and how it was nice for them to hear, I think, each other's and realize they're not alone. We all have these things happen to us.
and such an important part of this is feeling that we're not alone. That's your book is going to provide that feeling. The discussions that come out of it are going to provide that feeling. I know the answer to this. It's painfully obvious, but why don't we all talk about our embarrassing moments more?
Well, they're embarrassing.
I mean, I talk about them all the time, Jessica.
But it's kind of strange. We're all kind of expected to just never talk about it, pretend everything's perfect, be like, oh, something in your life wasn't perfect. Ooh.
Yeah.
Really? What is that? What is this like? We all kind of reflexively hide it about ourselves, pretend everyone is doing great all of the time, except for that one person's moment that they're not allowed or never end up telling anyone.
Yeah, it is a thing where we all try to present this, sort of perfect face. And it's funny because none of us are perfect, right? And like I said, we all have these embarrassing moments. And I think sharing these embarrassing moments helps break that down a little bit, that perfectionism that we all kind of strive for and fight against at the same time.
Yeah, one of my friend's moms always used to say, never compare your interior self to someone else's outside or something like that. And what if we just suddenly lived in a world where there wasn't two versions of a person? There was just what they're experiencing and the fact that things just happen to people sometimes. I don't know if that would turn into some kind of middle school fictional utopia, certainly speculative, but it begs the question of what if humans just never decided that we all have to pretend to be perfect all the time?
Now, that would be an interesting concept for a book.
So if you could go back and tell your middle school self something, what would you tell her?
That it'll be okay, that it's okay that these embarrassing moments happen to you. It's okay. It happens to everybody. I think one of the biggest shocks for me when I was a kid was discovering that other people had sort of an inner critic voice. I thought I was the only one. And so there's a moment in the book where Belinda discovers her friend has this as well, her very confident friend. I wanted to tell that because I would have liked to have heard that as a kid, that you're not the only one that thinks this way and that it will be okay.
That's actually a really interesting point because she thinks that it's a voice in her head and she's therefore crazy. And I can see how a kid would put all of those pieces of information together in that way. But yeah, that's another one of those things. There are probably so many things about being human that if we all just were willing to talk about them, it would be everyone.
Yes.
So, what would you say to the writer out there who is afraid of all of this and afraid it's going to go wrong and afraid it's going to go badly?
I think I would say that you're not the only one that feels that way. I will freely admit that's me. I've felt that way. I suspect strongly that others feel that way as well. And that, you just got to keep at it and keep putting one foot in front of the other. And if you want to do this, just do it.
Did it almost make you stop?
Yes, of course. Like I stopped for 20 years pretty much. I always, kept playing around and kept writing it. I'd take the odd class, but I stopped pursuing it. I just did it because I couldn't help it. I just loved it so much. So I did it just for me for a long time, but I definitely stopped trying to actually get published for a very long time, largely because I had a hard time with the rejection of it all and the confidence. So I would definitely just say, just keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep going, and you're not alone.
You define confidence in a way that's very workable. When I was that age, I thought confidence meant suddenly you step into a shampoo ad and the fan is hitting you, the light is hitting you, traffic stops, you are perfect, your outfit is perfect. and everyone wants to be your friend. That's what I thought confidence was. And I never figured out how people got the wind machine and the spotlight and the perfect outfit. And some people almost walk around with an entire film crew sometimes. It's like they glow, but they do sometimes. It's like you swear you can see a little spotlight over them. But sometimes I think that it could be this workable. It could be these building blocks. It could be go out and get hurt enough times and see that you're okay. It could be just keep doing your best and see what happens. And I appreciate that so much in a world that tells girls, just be confident. Okay, how?
Yep. No, exactly. I mean, confidence is often portrayed as, like you said, the shampoo commercial. And it's really more about how you feel, and not just how you feel, but how you can get out of your comfort zone and do even when you don't feel, that confidence. Fake it till you make it kind of thing, right? When you look at somebody who looks confident, they don't necessarily 100% feel that way, right? I think that the more we start breaking down those kinds of barriers, the better.
So what do you think it is? Do you think it is a person's personal volume turned all the way up? Is it the freedom to do stuff even if you're scared? What do you think confidence is?
Yeah, I think confidence is all of those things. And I think it depends on the person. Something that requires bravery from me might be different than you guys, right? And I think confidence is a combination of many factors, which includes doing things that are difficult for you, but also feeling confident in something, getting practice in something to the point where you feel like you're an expert or feel that you're good at something. It's kind of a combination of all those things.
And she was also able to look back, well, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this other thing happened. What could be worse than that? And I think being able to look back and be like, well, I've been through this thing and this other thing and this other thing. Will it really be worse? I think being able to almost have that benchmark of, well, I've survived all these other things. Maybe it's going to be okay.
I think what Belinda is like middle school is full of just these little tiny little rubs everywhere you go. And she's out there doing it. And so I think as a character, you've really nailed that experience because no one gets through middle school unscathed. And when I taught middle school, I was still pretty much scarred.
Well, thank you very much. Like I was aiming for, that middle school experience. So it sounds like for you ladies that hit the mark. So that was good to hear.
Yes. I bet no one goes through the querying process unscathed either. And maybe you get to a certain point where you're like, well, I got 50 form rejections, 100 form rejections. I got a few people spending a few paragraphs telling me why I should not be writing books. I don't know why people do that. Just send the form rejection. My goodness. If you get the really mean one, if you get the go away, if you get I think it's rare, but every so often a book gets torn apart that way. Once you've done that a few times, I think you can look back and be like, well, it all went wrong and I kept going and it worked out.
Yes.
So, okay, writers, go out there, get rejected, not on purpose. But get rejected, and soon you will have the confidence to keep going, to get rejected more until finally you get that yes.
Kristy, thank you so much. This was terrific talking to you. Tell us again, where do we find you online and when does your book come out?
So you can visit my website, KristyJackson.ca, and you can also find my book in stores and on Amazon as of May the 21st.
Well, we're so happy for you, Kristy. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
We are so glad that you joined us. And as always, we appreciate your feedback. Just head on over to the iTunes store and let us know what you think. It not only helps us make this podcast be the best it can be, but it also affects our ratings within the iTunes platform.
We'd love to hear from you. If you're feeling brave and want to submit your page for our First Pages podcast, you can send it to academy@manuscriptwishlist.com with First Pages podcast in the subject line. We'd also just love to hear from you.
And if you'd like to learn more about the Manuscript Academy and everything we have to offer, just jump on over to manuscriptacademy.com.